we considered bringing in a third-party manager. Being business owners, we started realizing that we're going to do this internally, and that became something that we were excited about doing.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to episode 46. What is it about real estate investing that would cause a successful business owner in a completely different field to buy 24 units? Well, my guest today is going to tell us. Martyn is the co-owner and co-founder of the hugely successful company called Optic Productions. His company has produced TV shows and movies, and they've created commercials and music videos for major league clients and recording artists. But he's here today to talk about his other passion, which is real estate investing, specifically the duplex he purchased 7 years ago and the 3 8 units he just purchased recently, how he found those properties, how he acquired them, and how they're working out. Matt, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, because it's completely different from real estate, and then kind of how you transitioned into real estate.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's been a long journey. Back in the 90s, there was always this interest in real estate. A lot of my friends were getting into that, flipping houses and whatnot. So there's always this background interest. But in starting our company in 1997, that was all-encompassing.
Your company, Optic, film and digital.
Yes. So that was precedent to everything, where that was everything, launching a business from scratch, building clients, getting more agencies on board and other clients and across the spectrum. So real estate was always sort of in the picture, but very, very much in the background. And so Optic eventually started gaining traction and growing. And in 2008, we came upon a foreclosure that really stood out as just an awesome duplex on a nice street, yet close to downtown, and it had everything. So we jumped on that opportunity and purchased that. But really, that was sort of a pet project. It was such a great opportunity that we jumped on it, and nothing really expanded from there for years until just a few months ago when we purchased these 24 units.
Okay, well, let's focus on that duplex, because that was about 7 years ago, right?
Yes.
You just stumbled across it one day and said, hey, guys, we own this, because you have, actually, let's back up a little bit more, because you have two partners in Optic, film and digital.
Yes.
The three of you are investors in the real estate as well.
Correct.
You found this duplex 7 years ago. How did that come about? Did you find it? Did your partners find it?
Yeah, I found it, and I just thought it was a great deal. I had sort of been exploring the option of buying a house myself. It didn't seem like a right fit for me personally, but I really liked so many things about it that I didn't want to let that go. My business partner saw the same thing. So yeah, we scooped that up.
Was this after the bubble burst, or was this pre?
This was right about when it was bursting.
So did you pay? Were you buying it at the top of the market or the bottom of the market?
Bottom of the market.
Okay, yeah. So you picked up a good bargain.
Yeah.
Well, what'd you pay for it?
$24,000.
$24,000 for a duplex. And by the way, you're in Lansing, Michigan, right?
Right.
That's where Optic film and digital is.
Yeah.
Lansing, Michigan, very close to Michigan State University. So this was 7 years ago. You picked up a duplex for $25,000.
Yeah.
And you weren't living on one side. You picked it up purely as a rental.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you able to rent it out for?
We were renting it out for $400 on the top and $450 on the bottom.
Okay, so you're getting about $850 a month. Yeah. And how did the cash flow work out?
It worked out well. It's kind of going back to why this didn't snowball as we had planned. It really, at that juncture, was sort of a distraction. It was, like I was saying, the business, starting that from scratch was all that we were doing for years. And we were at a point where we could do something like this, could expand into it. But we didn't really find reliable help. Like there were people that were renovating it or doing these different tasks, but they weren't reliable enough. We, as individuals, didn't really see as much of a payoff in doing that ourselves as we did with the other business. There's all these possibilities and huge potential that we saw in our business that we know that's our core competency that we're doing every day. These are presenting themselves to us all the time. So that just inherently was still taking a priority over this duplex, which at the time was kind of a distraction. We'd kind of chip away at it on the side and do this and that and the other thing. But the payoff, or let's say somebody wasn't renting, well, it's only this much. Or if somebody is renting, it's only this much. And it was not like we were not geared, our company was not geared to tackle that. So it did not really snowball as I think typically that may have, and maybe as we expected, because one duplex turning into two, into more separate units, it just didn't, we saw that as more and more distractions. We knew that if we were going to do it, we would need to really take a leap. And at that point, it didn't, just nothing had presented itself yet.
Let me push on that a little bit further, because I know a lot of people do this. They go into business with their friends and they say, hey guys, let's pull our money together and buy a property, and we'll flip it or we'll rehab it and hold on to it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. Now, in your case, it's not that it didn't work out. It's just you didn't have the time to focus on it like you probably should have. In other words, you were treating your main core business, Optic, that's where all your attention was going. So you weren't able to treat the duplex as the business it needed to be treated as. That's kind of you're nodding your head yes. So for the listeners out there, you're kind of agreeing with that.
Right. It's something that duplex we developed, but our real estate business did not blossom. We did not see a need to expand it at that point, not with that formula. Buying separate units and having them scattered in different places around the city just, again, seemed like more of a distraction, more things that needed to be done. Whereas we saw, if we're going to do this, we need to do it in a way where the, economies of scale make sense.
All right. Economies of scale. That's important. But you're also getting at something that I think is very important to understand. I mean, you bought this duplex for $25,000. That's insanely
24
cheap.
For what it's worth.
24,000. I mean, that's insanely cheap.
Yeah, it was a score.
So what, other than the time that you weren't able to put into it that was necessary, what was it that kept you from saying, wow, we should just repeat this over and over and over again? There
were little things, for one, the house next door and up and down the block. I mean, it's just a gorgeous street. And we have our rental, which was okay. We did some work on it. But next door to it was a dilapidated rental that was right. I mean, we're talking 10 feet away from our building, and that was falling apart. I mean, there were problems with animals in there and whatnot. So that was kind of, dragging us down. And of course, the type of tenants that a place like that might attract aren't necessarily ideal. It was great when people were living there, and then when people weren't, it really went downhill, and it was kind of in limbo as to whether that would be leveled or not. And with that,
the house next door.
Yeah, the house next door. And so with that, well, how much do we want to invest in this when the without describing it, they were right next to each other and they're basically sharing the lot. There's you look out your window and there's this looming, building that should be demolished right next door. So that was another thing that kind of got, for a single female tenant might not be as enthusiastic about living in a place with that next door. And who knows, there's there's, I heard that there were bats flying in and out and all these things. And now finally with the city leveling that, it was a great.
So the city did come along.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a process. That takes
but
time.
how many tenants did you lose? How much money did you lose?
It was one of those things where we didn't feel it was kind of in the way of us putting a lot more money into better renovations of our building, because we felt that it was being dragged down by that one directly next door.
Was it a good neighborhood otherwise?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
So gorgeous neighborhood. You just had a bad neighbor that was impacting.
The building had gone way too far. And in fact, that building, we had the opportunity to buy it for cash for, I forget if it was $11,000 or $13,000. And we were putting that together, and we're just like, why are we doing that? Like, what is this? This house is a disaster. Everybody in the neighborhood was talking about it. In retrospect, we may have purchased it and then talked to all the neighbors, had them chip in, and then leveled it ourselves. Now, given that the city ended up doing that, I'm glad we didn't, but it stood for, 7 years longer than it probably should have. And the chimney would collapse one day. The person who actually bought it used it. He took out a mortgage, even though he bought it with cash. He somehow financed that and was paying less for that house than he would have paid for parking because he was a state contractor. He paid, and he would have paid more for parking a block away than he did for that house.
So he was just using it for a parking lot?
Yeah. And then he ended up renting it and doing all these things, but he wasn't maintaining it, and there parts of the house were not on a foundation. As I said, there was just, it was a mess visually and every place else. So you can imagine what kind of, everything that it was attracting was counter to what that street looks like. It was just beautiful. So now with that out of the way, now we're ready to put, more into it and really, inside and out.
Right.
Making
So
everything
how much did you put into the duplex when you first bought it for $24,000?
It was pretty a nominal amount. That was so long ago. I actually don't have the exact figures offhand, but we it was all superficial stuff. So it was really carpet, paint, minor bathroom renovations, kitchens. There was no kitchen upstairs. The upstairs unit did not have a kitchen, so we converted that into a kitchen, which was nice. Downstairs kitchen, we kind of chipped away at it. Just recently, we got the granite countertops, the new stove and refrigerator.
So you still own the duplex?
Oh, yes.
And now you're making it like a super nice.
Yeah. Now it's at the point where we can, take it to the next level.
Right. So what kind of rents are you getting from it now?
We just did that recently, so we're commanding in the 500 range. Just edged it up, like just to get long-term tenants in there.
Now, is that market rate, or are you?
It's slightly below market rate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, that's pretty good if you can get the granite countertops, and it sounds like you're very close to downtown.
Right. That's the idea, is to get good long-term tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you and your partners, you were putting all the work into the duplex in the beginning, or were you hiring contractors to do all of it?
In the beginning, we were inherently helping out quite a bit. But we had contractors working on that. But they were unreliable, and we would end up picking up the slack. Or the worst thing that we've found with contractors is not the ones that can or can't do it, but the ones that genuinely try, but for whatever reason don't follow through. So
they say they can do it, and then you find out, no, they really can't.
And we know that there's people that have done major renovation jobs for us in the past, but things happen in their life. They're not able to follow through. They want to, and they sincerely are trying, but weeks go by and you're finding out that this isn't happening. And that's really the toughest thing, is to lose 2 weeks and then start the process of beginning the process of finding somebody else to do it. So in that case, a lot of times we personally had to pick up the slack ourselves because of we were just sort of functioning on a base level. Friends, they'd be like, "Oh, well, you have this place. Can I live there?" We're like, "Yeah." And if and they would fix it up themselves, and we'd knock off the rent. And so it was just kind of a, play it by ear stage.
Now, the three of you, are all three of you managing equally? Because I take it you're managing this property. I think you've told me that you don't have a third-party management company, but you're
Correct.
managing yourselves. How do you split up the work that's involved in managing a property like this?
Yeah, that's the advantage of having business partners for 19 years, is that we know our own strengths and weaknesses and what we're drawn to. So it's really organic. I generally deal with more of the numbers. John generally deals with more of the renovations. Dom is like seeking new properties, and he has a huge insight with dealing with the municipalities. And all three of us delve into each. There's no clear-cut roles. All of us wear all the different hats at different times. But just generally, given that I'm on the road the majority of the time, it's logical that I would be doing the finances, and that's generally what I did with Optics. So,
what about the leasing hat and the dealing with tenants part of it?
We immediately hired someone to deal with the day-to-day things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you have someone who collects the rent and places new tenants and does that kind of thing.
And that's another one of those things where all three of us are involved with that as well. But we have somebody, who's complementing everything that we do. And we purchased this just over a month ago. So things are still gelling exactly.
Well, no, I'm talking about I'm still talking about the duplex.
Oh, the duplex.
So I know.
Yeah.
So you bought 3 8 units or 24 units
Right.
a month ago. So I know that things have changed for you.
Right.
But before we get to that, with the duplex, were you guys finding your tenants and managing and dealing with the tenants?
Right.
Yourself?
That was usually, we preferred to go with a referral, somebody who knew somebody. And so it was,
friends referring friends.
Yeah, friends referring friends. Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets into what I'm saying, is that it's on such a small scale compared to what we're doing every day, that there was not a need for defined roles. It was like, oh, okay, well, this kind of falls into place. We'll do this. Maybe a few months go by and then this falls into place. But again, it's just our other business was, so much more lucrative that there wasn't any urgent. There was never any urgency.
No urgency on the duplex.
Where we have deadlines every day with high-paying jobs. At what point the duplex doesn't have a deadline? It's like, oh, it would be nice to have somebody in there, but what difference does a week make, really? But then the weeks can turn into months.
So let's talk about your partners and how you structured the deal on the duplex. How did you determine how much money each of you would put in, and what your shares would be?
That we've always been equal partners on everything, so that was inherent. And so we just structured that in the way that we would. And the motivation with the duplex was, it was a deal that we felt we couldn't pass up. We wanted to diversify and get into real estate, and it was just let's do this and renovate it. And just to back up and put this in perspective, when we bought our building for Optic 5 years before that, we completely gutted and renovated a 2,400 square foot unit. In fact, beyond gutting it, we rebuilt some of the walls and did things like that. So we had done large scale renovation projects, and this wasn't a foreign thing to us. This is much on a much smaller scale than what we had done previous. But it was one of those things where the formal structure didn't require it, and we were doing a lot of other things. So it just, we didn't really necessarily have specific roles. We just sort of let things play out organically.
And how did you formalize that? Did you do an LLC or what
Yes.
sort of agreement did you have?
Yeah, at the time we were getting the advice that, for liability reasons in particular, that it would be to our advantage to create separate LLCs for each individual property. So we had one LLC for optic, we had one LLC for the building that optic was leasing, and we had a new LLC for this duplex.
Okay, so you did a completely new LLC for the duplex.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the duplex. I mean, it sounds like it was at least a good foot in the door of real estate rental property investing, because you bought the building for your core business, which is also real estate investing. But as far as rental property investing, the duplex was a good way to get started. You got in for relatively cheap. It doesn't sound like you've lost any money. I'm sure by now you've probably paid yourselves back everything you have into it and more. So that's a great start. Now, cut forward 7 years, and here you are. You just did a major deal within the past couple months. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was kind of the type of thing that we were looking for, where it was like Goldilocks. It was not too big, not too small. It looked just right. And we had a motivated seller. This was off market. And we got wind of this, and everything seemed right. It was, we weren't like staging this for months or years in advance. So we were not like locked and loaded, ready to pull the trigger on a deal this size.
Yeah, were you even looking for another rental property opportunity?
Very casually, and the things that we had seen previous. I mean, we weren't actively looking to the extent where where we were ready to go. But this came along, and just as that duplex was years ago, everything seemed like a good fit.
It seemed right.
Yeah.
How did it come to your attention? I mean, it wasn't on the market, so how did you find out about it?
Dom, he had his finger on the pulse, and through knowing real estate people, we just became aware of that. They were ready to put it on the market, and we made an offer, in hopes of keeping it off market. It was touch and go for a while, because, as I said, we didn't have time to prepare. We were, once we found it, we were putting the pedal to the metal in reassuring us that we were going to come through and that they should keep it off market. And so we did everything we could. And at times, really, the speed of the financial institutions, among other things, were making it where we weren't sure if it was gonna happen. It's not, what conventional wisdom might say, might happen 5 years ago, might not apply today. And financial institutions, in our experience, at this stage, take a decent amount of time to.
Yeah, they have no sense of urgency. In fact, they have the opposite. I know it was 3 different 8 units, but why don't you tell us a little bit about the properties and where they're located and what they consisted of? Yeah,
they're located in Hazlitt and Williamston, which have great school systems. That was very important to us. Prime locations, walking distance. We just see a big trend with
walking distance to like downtown, or
yes, downtown Hazlitt.
And by the way, these were 3 separate 8-unit communities, so they weren't like next door to each other. They were in different parts of town, right?
Correct. The Hazlitt ones, one of them is literally on the lake. It has a lake view, and you're looking at the park and the lake. So that is just ideal and prime. The other one in Hazlitt is just a few blocks away from that. So it's a little hot spot with nightlife there. And there's a lot of people in anywhere they live in the city that like going to those places. And both of these units are right next to that. And then the other one that's a little off the lake is closer to downtown Hazlitt. And then the one in Williamston is just ideal in that it's right next to a park. And also 1 block from downtown Williamston, which is, again, for the town of that size with all the cool restaurants and places to go at night, it's really special. And again, we have the good school system, and they're just nice units. They're just everything about it. It's the location in particular. These really resonate.
Nice units. What year would you say they were built?
Early 70s.
Early 70s. Updated?
Just a few of the units, but we kind of like that too. There's some that we're prioritizing, but the ones with the lake view, we're going all out. Those are going to be, the crown jewel, and also that has the entryway. So that has, the amenities like the laundry and like the hallway inside and things like that. The other ones are more like of a motel type entrance.
Okay, the exterior, no shared hallways or common area, more exterior doors. That always helps cut down on expenses a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's some upside potential. Let's go back to kind of like you came across your partner Dom found these properties.
Yes.
Through some of his real estate contacts. What was the story with the owner? Why was he or she selling the properties?
It was just time. The owner was very advanced in age, and she's living in another state, and it's the children, I don't think, felt the need to carry the torch. So it was just time, I think, for the family as a whole to make the decision to sell. She was managing the properties and just kind of becoming fatigued by it, and who was going to manage the properties was becoming more and more of an issue. Exactly.
Sounds like the children did not want to take over the management responsibilities. No. What was the owner asking for these properties?
Upwards of $650, because we ended up closing for about $650.
$650 for all three of them?
Yes.
Wow. You did pretty well there. Good for you.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah. So talk me through it. How did you found out about these properties? You found out, the owner wanted $650 for them. What'd you do? Take me through it step by step, how you were able to negotiate and take these properties down.
Well, we were certainly interested, and so we called our financial institutions and talked with them. And when he was talking about the down payment that would be necessary for that, and he's like, "Can you do that?" And I kind of laughed and said, "It's possible, painful, but possible." And so that began the journey of putting that together, and we spoke with a second financial institution, and so we've had prior experience with both. But it was a real process. It was we were putting together lots of tax documents and more tax documents, and then.
Were you dealing with a small bank that
yes.
was required?
Yes.
Were requesting this?
Right.
So like a smaller local type bank?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, and at the same time, we're building more and more in our checking account to show them that we are capable and show that trajectory. It's, honestly, it was kind of a whirlwind. There were a lot of requests, and then of course, then a month goes by, and then they needed more information on that month. And I think that as time was going on, though, they were more and more reassured that, yes, we were kind of starting from nothing, but we were going to 0 to 60 pretty quickly as far as showing them what resources we could bring to the table. And ultimately, that's, for all of the bumps and obstacles we had, we just kept bringing more and more resources to the table, and we go back to that duplex. Its value has increased threefold, so we were able to mortgage that and bring that as well. So bringing everything that we could to close this, got it done.
So that's an interesting process, because the bank, the small community bank, is going to look at you and your other two partners, and they're going to say, what experience do you have managing 24 units or anything like 24 units. And because you don't have that experience, you have a duplex, that's going to give them a little bit of concern. And I'm sure that's what you kept running into. They wanted to know, all right, are you guys going to be good stewards of the money that they're lending into your property? So you had to keep proving yourselves over and over again. And obviously you were able to get to that point. It sounds like at that point you did not have any sort of loan or mortgage on your duplex. And you acquired a new loan, you financed your duplex in order to raise some of the money for the down payment. Right.
That duplex, it was a very nominal amount left on the mortgage. So we just wiped that out so that could be used for either financial institution that would be available to bring to the table.
How much were you able to pull out of the duplex?
I believe they ended up valuing that to the point that we could get just under 50 for it as far as financing.
So you basically pulled out twice what you put in.
Yeah.
And you were able to put it down on 24 units.
Right.
So isn't
really
that
opened the door.
That, you're able to parlay a $24,000 duplex into a down payment for a 24 unit or 24 units and still have the duplex at the same time.
It really that really helped us too. Yeah. We needed something like that to help give it wind in the sails. Yeah.
Perfect. So you had to do that. What other things did you have to do to prove yourself to the bank? Were they concerned at all about you managing the properties?
They were. I think they were kind of neutral with that. Of course, they asked repeatedly what our experience was. And I think I had managed an apartment complex or a condominium complex in Chicago with over 100 units back in the 90s, just as a temp. But it did give me a little bit of the lay of the land. We did have this duplex, which, after 8 years has continued to improve. But the biggest thing is that us being business owners for 19 years, the financial institution saw in a very, I think they like seeing businesses grow in a small traditional way, which is exactly what we've done. It's been incremental, steady growth with, a conservative lending process
with Optic.
Yes. So with Optic, it's 19-year history demonstrated that we're financially prudent and not making huge moves with giant loans, this or that or the other thing. So I think that they could see that financially that we're not making any drastic or concerning moves.
Right. So the fact that you had a steady, performing, successful company in a completely different field gave them comfort that you would be able to achieve the same sort of results with the 24 units.
Yes. And I think that while they could always hang that question over our head, what experience do you have managing units? At the same time, they saw that, and so they didn't really, roll us over the coals, so to speak.
And that's one of the nice things about a smaller, more local bank is you're dealing with people who are making decisions there in the community. They're not at some corporate office in Rock Hill, South Carolina. They're actually here, and they know you, and you can talk to them, and they can ask you whatever questions they want.
And frankly, I don't think that ever would have worked. I think that this is a more like where they see what we're doing and what we're about and who we are. And the fact that, we had personal experience with both of them, either with our personal accounts or business accounts, so that they're not wondering what's behind the curtain. It's all right here. And they could see actually what these guys are is more than what's on paper.
Yeah.
Like seeing that this was, if you look at our trajectory and where we're going, there's much more potential for the upside.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but if you're buying at $650, you're probably borrowing about $200,000 in that range?
Plus, yeah, a little more than that.
A little bit more than that. Yeah. You probably roll in a few closing costs. 70% loan to value?
That's about right. Yeah.
Okay. What kind of interest rate were you able to get?
5%.
Okay. Yeah,
which we were pleased with that.
And balloon payment, when is this due?
5 years.
5 years. Yeah, that's pretty typical for a bank type loan. 5-year, 20-year AM, probably 70% loan to value. So you were able to make that work. Let's talk about the negotiations with the seller herself. How did that go?
It went pretty well.
Who was doing the negotiation, by the way? Was it Dom or you?
It's the three of us collectively. We generally, with all that, we consult with each other and come to a consensus. So that was, not surprisingly, as they went through and did the inspections, they found faults with the buildings. And to the point that we were coming in, we wanted to come in $55,000 less than their asking price. And that was justified.
What kind of problems did you find?
There was a roof that needed to be replaced, the second level decking on one of the buildings, and a number of superficial things. The only real liability was involving the uneven pavement that needed to be done, like where our insurance guy, again, someone who we've worked with for years and is familiar with the community, he went and did a visual inspection. He's like, yeah, okay, I'll insure these, but you're going to want to level out the entry, the sidewalks. The Williamston unit is in a floodplain, so that, of course, tacks on an extra expense. But,
that's okay. What kind of floodplain are you in? Do you know?
It's right on the edge of it. In fact, one of the corners of the building is not in the floodplain.
I have a property like that, and it's in 100. There's a corner of one of the buildings on the property that's in 100-year floodplain. It's a flood zone A, I think, and it is costing us $15,000 a year in flood insurance.
It's rough.
What are you paying? What kind of?
It's not that much, but I believe it's to the tune of $3,600 a year.
Yeah, it's painful to pay it, isn't it?
Right. Oh yeah, it's tough, and we were kind of hoping, since it was on the edge, that they recently rezoned those, and I don't know if you've looked into that.
Yeah, you mean that FEMA's redone the flood maps?
Yeah. So we had somebody look into that. Unfortunately, it's still in there, but
something to be aware of when you're buying property, to check the FEMA maps and make sure, because they've been redone recently, so the previous owner may not even be aware that they're in a flood zone.
Yeah, in this case, it created a bit of a false sense of hope, in that we were hoping maybe it would fall outside of it, but it's still in there. But that would have just been a bonus. We're still really happy with this regardless. And then a number of superficial things on the exterior, which we're happy to take care of. The inspector came back and said that all of the units, or the vast majority of them, are at the point where should probably go through and do full renovations. But as I said, we're happy about that, because as people move out, then we'll, do full renovations, and for the new people moving in, that'll be a different rate structure.
And is that on all 24 of the units, or just the ones that are facing the lake?
On all 24. All 24. We're prioritizing, though. The ones on the lake are, those we really want to get to the highest level possible. Williamston are definitely, there's a lot of room to grow as far as those. And then the other unit, it's not as much of a priority, but those also, kind of as needed for now. But that's, as we renovate the other units, we have all kinds of nice kitchen amenities and things like that we can kind of cycle down. So if somebody, if a refrigerator breaks, well, we have a refrigerator that we just pulled out as we newly renovate the nicer units.
You found these issues in your inspection. Did you go back and renegotiate? You had it under contract for $650, or all three of the properties under contract for $650. You found about $55,000 in improvements that you needed to put in because of issues you found during the physical inspection. How'd you renegotiate that?
Basically, they came back and were saying that this was this was priced to sell, and that they were already, selling this below market value. And so they came down 15, which we weren't surprised by. And they countered a number of the things, in that basically their biggest counter argument was that the market value is more than 650, which we, acknowledged. And that was the negotiation. We were kind of running out of time. We needed to, because of the financing, because we weren't coming in with cash or whatever, there's still these other variables, and we wanted to facilitate the deal. We did not negotiate every nickel, as sometimes we do. But I think there's a time to do that, and then there's a time to know a good deal when you see it and lock it down. And that's what we did here.
Yeah, you still had a great deal. I mean, it's the extra money is a little that knew you had to put into the property is a little hard to take, but at the end of the day, it sounds like you still got a great deal. This was off market. Was there any sort of broker involved?
Yes, there was. And she did a great job. And I actually, while we're talking about it, that was another benefit of working with local financial institutions, is that they sat down and got to know, both MSU, FCU, and Independent Bank sat down with us and got to know what we're looking to accomplish, what's a good way for this to succeed. I like that they're looking out for our success. And one of those was to put aside a line of credit to allow us to renovate that, so that when we close, given what we need to bring to the closing, that we're not scraping together to do the renovations which are necessary, that we can go in full steam ahead and do what needs to be done.
That's great. So you built in a line of credit that allows you to do exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
Go in strong. How much were they willing to build in for you?
$25,000.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So that was the negotiation part. You got it. You got it through the financing. You got it through the negotiation. Any hiccups along the way?
Again, during the process of financing, there were a number of them where at times we weren't sure if it was going to happen. But again, it was kind of a whirlwind, and it was just involving paperwork and getting things filed and this and that. And partly the broker is facilitating this, and she's doing her job in saying, we have to close by this date. This has to happen. Why hasn't this happened? And making sure that the financial institutions feel that sense of urgency.
So she was wrangling the lenders, wrangling you, wrangling the seller.
Right. Getting everybody, herding cats, getting everything where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And and that's an important part of the process too. So
how did you do it then? You had 3 different properties. Let's talk about the structure of this, because it's not all one property where typically you would just get one loan. At one transaction, you have 3 different properties that are all parceled separately. How'd you work that out? Did you get 3 separate loans, or did you build it all into one lump sum?
That was something that I consulted with on a number of people as to how that could be structured. Again, in the past, I heard that you should have a separate LLC for each individual property. And I kind of questioned how far we would want to take that. Let's say we have, assuming this keeps growing, we would have a lot of different things to file every year for taxes. A lot of, things get confusing with the closing documents and all these different things.
Yeah, you and I actually had this conversation during the process.
Yeah, you were one of the people that I consulted.
Yeah, you were getting different advice.
Yeah.
And, so where did you end up with that?
After speaking with the lawyer, the accountant, the insurance people. They were basically saying, of course, you can have separate documents or separate LLCs. There are benefits to that, but it's probably going to be better in the long term to have these 4 properties, the 3 new ones and the duplex under one LLC. Make sure we have $2 million coverage. And beyond that, probably look into LLCs or into another LLC for future.
For the next set. Yeah, when we had the conversation, if I recall correctly, my input was it's better to just have one LLC and get the insurance or the umbrella insurance to kind of supplement you there. Partly because each LLC requires a separate bank account. A separate, and since there's 3 of you, you've got a dual member LLC, which requires a separate tax return, which then, and then if you've got a separate bank account, you probably need a separate set of checks. And you got to pay for those checks. It just becomes
logistically
it's like
and day-to-day
4 times
operation.
the work. Yeah. But I do remember saying it's the lender that you need to talk to see what they're going to allow or what they're going to want to see.
Yeah, and the people that I listed that I consulted with, I left them out because I consulted with both of them as well, and that basically everybody felt comfortable with having these 4 properties lumped under a single LLC. So that was reassuring. So we moved forward with that with confidence.
Good. So, and the lender was fine with one LLC.
Oh, absolutely.
And how did they treat it then? Did they treat it as 24 units, one property, or is it 3 separate properties that you can split off at any time?
They did treat it. It's all under one loan, but it is treated as 3 separate properties.
So you valued each of the 3 properties separately, but then got a loan for the lump sum.
Right.
Gotcha.
And we know that because of the number of documents that we signed. There were 3 huge stacks.
So you had to sign 3 times as many documents.
But
and there's 3 of you, so that's 9 times the amount of signatures there.
Yeah, but we're definitely happy with that because, for example, the floodplain, the Williamston one that's on the floodplain, it could be to our advantage if we increase the value of all 3 of these properties to the point that they're comfortable with, let's say, loan to value. Let's say maybe they have 2 buildings and the duplex that are worth more than the loan. We could maybe spin off the Williamston one or pay that off in full and not have to pay the flood insurance, which to my understanding, once people pay those off, very rarely do they carry flood insurance in areas like this.
All right. Well, let's talk about the upside then in these properties because you did close on them.
Yeah.
It sounds like you went through some ups and downs there, but you did get to the finish line. You own the properties now. Talk about the upside. What are you going to do to improve the value on these properties?
We're going to, in the case of the Lakeview property, we're completely gutting it. And just everything is...
One unit at a time as people move out, or are you kicking
Yes.
everyone out and gutting it?
No, we're waiting one unit at a time. With all the units, that's the case. Mm-hmm. And it's really just a matter of priority and timing. Currently, we're renovating 2 of the Lakeview properties. So those... that's got our hands full. We're kind of building our crew as well. We did not come into this with, we're contracting out companies to do the larger jobs, but just as we're building a management company, we want to have, do all the service internally as much as possible. You can't just snap your fingers and get 50 reliable, workers to show up the next day. But we're building that, with what we had before, and it's growing and expanding. Soon, hopefully, we'll be able to renovate many more units at the same time. But right now, those 2, with the scale of renovations we're doing, that's the top priority. And then the other ones, the other units in the other buildings, we're just renting, and we'll when the opportunity is right, as people move out, renovate those.
All right. There's a little slower pace on the other 2.
Yeah.
What are you doing as you upgrade?
Fully redoing the kitchen, the bathroom. And as I said, with some of them, the appliances or cabinetry might not be in that bad a shape. So that may be an opportunity to swap out something that might be original from 1970. We have some cabinetry that's in great shape. And so let's say 3 months from now, a stove might break in another unit. We can use that there. But yeah, we're down to the studs in those 2 units that we're renovating.
And how do you see rents improving? I mean, what are you getting now in rents, and what do you hope to get once you do some of this work?
We intend the Lakeview properties, we're really setting our sights high with that. That was, I think, part of that. If had the original owners kept it, they were going to increase rents across the board, without a doubt.
Had they been keeping regular rent increases going?
No.
So they were below market then, I would imagine.
Without a doubt. Mm-hmm. I would say below market, but at the same time, the state of some of these units, I would say, wouldn't justify that much more. But I think that there's, they just sort of just kind of going month to month and maybe letting some people move in that didn't have the security deposit or things like that. Just really, they were fully occupied, yet not nearly meeting their full potential.
Mm-hmm. So you might have had 100% occupancy, but maybe your economic occupancy was a lot less.
A lot less. And also there's potentially problem tenants as well. So
let's talk. You're dealing with them now. So what have you inherited here? You've had it. How long have you owned the properties now?
We've had them for 6 weeks now.
6 weeks. Yeah. Okay. So you're starting to get a grasp of what you've inherited here.
Yes.
What are you finding?
Good things for the most part. I've enjoyed most of the conversations I've enjoyed all the conversations I've had with tenants. There's some others that I haven't yet communicated with that don't seem to be completely reasonable. But of course, that's like, people are people. So we're off to a good start. There's some people that, even with the duplex, when somebody would apply and not be able to come up with the security deposit, that's a huge red flag that we would not have allowed.
If they can't come up with their security deposit, they're not going to come up with your rent.
Right. And that's so not a surprise that that's happening. So, we're starting the process and talking with people, but, now we're getting people that when we're talking with them about the urgency of them coming up with rent, they're trying. They're coming up with something, and so then
those conversations.
Yes,
now.
But that we will work with anyone that we can, and it's the people that are not paying rent at the same time asking for better amenities that you have to question, the rationale.
Right. What do you think? How many people do you think you're going to have to evict? I mean, if you're talking to people about the urgency of paying their rents, soon that conversation is going to turn to the urgency of you evicting them.
Right. I've lived in units where the process begins the day after rent was due, and that's a good way to get that conversation started and find out where things stand. We don't want to evict anybody. We do want to communicate. And if people aren't communicating or if they're communicating in an unreasonable way, well, then that's difficult. But, it's just a matter of, it's just the thing will take its course. We give people notice, and then it's just a process from there.
Mm-hmm. So you're going through the process. You're giving notice?
Literally beginning that in the last few days.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I'd imagine that with the woman who had been managing the properties herself, she probably had relationships with these tenants where they were friends and, being an older, maybe mm-hmm. she was sort of a motherly figure to them. And it was probably difficult for her to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. So now, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like when you inherit these kinds of properties, the mindset is still there. It's like, well, so-and-so didn't make me pay on the first of the month.
Right.
And now you're going to make me pay on the first of the month. How can you do that? So
right.
I'd imagine those are the types of conversations you're having.
Yeah, that's. I think that did create a different level of expectation than what they agreed to. I can empathize with people that are late on rent. When we were starting the business and I struggled out of college, that was the priority. So I've had a lot of different jobs and a lot of different situations in which I would let the landlord know, here's what I have now, here's what you'll have in 2 weeks, whatever it was. I was always sure to communicate with the landlord and let them know what's going on. And for the most part, they were always very open to that. But
you were willing to communicate.
Absolutely. And I just don't understand. I can understand a lot of things and I can, look past a lot of things, but it's almost twofold. Then it becomes, there's two problems. It's like, okay, one, they're not paying, and one, they're not, why aren't they returning our calls? Like,
They must not like
right. It adds this level of frustration to it. It's like, okay, well, they're not doing themselves any favors here. Or again, if they're communicating, but in an unreasonable way, well, but
Right.
the gray area as to somebody who only has this much and is doing everything and is scared to be evicted. We're not looking to exacerbate problems that they may have in their life. We'll want to work with them and sit down, and maybe they just need help with financial management. Maybe it's something that can be cleared out. It's, so that's a gray area. But for people that, once they're 2 months behind and they say they're going to have money in 2 weeks, well, are they going to catch up on all that past, all these, there's, at some point it's like, okay, well, the process should begin.
Are your tenants on leases?
Yeah, a number of month to months as well. I would say about half are month to month.
So if they're month to month, you can get rid of them pretty easily then. That's good news for you.
They expire right very regularly.
What else are you finding out about the property as you kind of get your arms around it?
Well, it's kind of a fun new frontier. It's nice looking at these units and seeing what they are and seeing what they could be. It's nice having the option of, okay, well, we could rent this now for this much, or we could renovate it for this much. And we're excited to see what the market value is. After we do these renovations, we'll find out what people are able and willing to pay, and maybe ratchet it down a little bit from there.
Do you have a sense of what the market will bear, or are you still
we're just finding that out. We know that these are underpriced, even as is. Mm-hmm. So that, the incremental increases will happen. But again, we're not in a hurry to do that. Right now we're getting a lay of the land and settling in, focused on the renovations of the ones that are prioritized. And as people move out, when new people move in, those will be paying a higher rate. And, people calling and having a friendly conversation at this point does not create an urgency for us to jack up their rent. I think we want to come in and show them that we're reasonable, people that want to work with them.
Well, let's talk about management. How are you handling management now?
When we first found out about the properties, that was something that we considered bringing in a third-party manager. Just in our initial conversations, because as I said, this isn't something we had built our planning for years. So we're like, okay, well, we could get this when we can, hire a management company for this much and still have this much profit and whatnot. Very quickly, just naturally, being business owners, we started realizing that we're going to do this internally. And that became something that we were excited about doing. It's kind of unique that we have businesses, we have the structure, we have an office, we have all of these resources. And, branding something like this is not difficult. Designing logos and business cards and all that stuff is something that we think is fun. So, building, and the technology today is just incredible. It was great to see how clients can contact us in these different ways and pay in these different ways. And how, our emergencies can be handled and all that without a management company. But, technology is a big percentage of the management, and not putting the burden on any of our shoulders too heavily. So it's shared between the three of us. And we immediately brought in a property manager who is handling the first contact when somebody calls Coburton. So that's very helpful. And, getting into the software and all these different things. It's something that's, it's nice to be kind of structured and have our minds wired in that way as business owners to start a new business that diversifies our income.
What kind of technology and software are you using?
We've we've been really happy with Grasshopper. That's something where you can structure the incoming calls to go to different people, and you can change that and modify that. So if somebody's looking for a new unit, they route that call to different people, to different priorities. We have, service or emergencies or any of these different things. It automatically is routing that to the person more appropriate, and then it goes down the line and calls others from there.
So is Grasshopper basically what you hear if I were to call Coburton? Grasshopper would be kind of like the voice answering system that routes me to where I want to go. Is that what Grasshopper is?
Right. We structured, with voiceover talent, we told them what to read.
If you have an emergency, dial this number.
Exactly.
Repair. If you want to lease a unit, call this number, and it would route, or dial this extension, it would route you to the right person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's nice going in right from the get-go with that level of professionalism and having a very good chance of somebody calling, be it within or outside of business hours, and getting a live voice and handling their situation. The tenants have been very happy with the prompt response that they've been receiving so far. So.
And what about the leasing part? Who's taking care of that?
We are just, as far as who's handling the leasing, we have not found, so far that's an online application process. So right now, like when you go to coburton.com, you'll see the application that routes through and funnels all that information in and for review, and then we go from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about the management software itself, as far as like keeping track of the rent roll and the financials? What do you guys use?
Buildium. And we've
say that again. Buildium.
Buildium, yes. And so we
spell that. I'm not familiar with it.
Like Buildium.
Okay.
Yes, and so we've heard that from a number of other people that for a company our size, that's a good. It's a nice software to use, and yeah, so far we've been happy with it. Again, we're building that now. That accepts online payments and does the rent roll and balances the books and all that.
Oh, perfect. That's what you need. Is that, since you're the financial guy, is that sort of your responsibility, or do you have someone else taking care of it?
Well, we're myself and some others share that in that. That's another thing. It's on the cloud, so it's nice that multiple people can access the information if necessary.
What lessons have you learned from owning and starting up Optic, which is a completely different field in film and digital, that you're applying to what you're doing here in real estate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of the things are so inherent at this point after 19 years that they're just kind of like automatic. But I think it goes beyond that, and that what I can think of myself as in terms of a tenant that might have a hiccup in their payment, or I can kind of empathize with somebody in that situation, where I think it's important to keep in mind, it's not just the renter in unit 3, but it's a person, and what brought them into the situation, and what solution can we find that's most mutually beneficial.
So you kind of see your tenants as clients, just like you would clients in your other business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Optic, I think it's nice having that synergy going in. The three of us know each other, where we know how, we operate, and not only amongst ourselves, but with other people, what kind of people we're looking to contract and work with. And it's not just a matter of doing a job, but this is somebody that we're working with, and we like to be on the same wavelength. But it's nice having that structure and that organization going in, and really it's just applying it to a new game.
As we wrap it up, what advice would you have for someone starting out in real estate investing?
For us, it wasn't the avenue of starting small and going incremental as it was with our business. Like with our business, we just slowly grew, and it was basically brick and mortar, slowly building clients and this and that. But with real estate, for us, it didn't play out that way. It needed to be at a scale in which it would be really motivational for us to go for it and do it and really go all out. And the duplex, frankly, was not enough. It wasn't, and then we heard from other people that had, like, maybe, let's say, the equivalent of 10 single unit rentals scattered around a city. And I would kind of dread that prospect compared to this, where we have, these units where this could really change our lives and our income, and we could see this snowballing into bigger and bigger things. So I think that maybe find your own path, and it might not be a traditional one, where, this has been a long road for us and 20 years in the making, for us to find these 3 units, and we're really happy about it and excited to see where else it takes us.
You knew from your experience with the duplex that you needed to go much bigger in order to be enthused and have the passion for what you're doing. You needed that sort of economy of scale to make it worth your time.
Yeah, but I think with individuals, it would be a different. That would be a different formula. Where I mean, to enter into that is obviously easier said than done. So I think there's a necessity to that. But yeah, it just I guess there is no traditional path, and to kind of think of what is really going to motivate. If you're going to do this, what's going to motivate you to really go all out and wake up in the morning and want to do it? Sometimes it might not be so exciting, but as a whole, it really should be.
Right. Well, congratulations on your new 24 units there, and it sounds like an exciting project. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to tell us about it today.
Thank you so much for having me. Great talking with you.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.